Hey, Friendly Hollow. Hey, it's new. We are getting ready to tie-dye our t-shirts. And I wanted to go over how we think best is to tie-dye shirts because there's a lot of different ways. And we've done a little bit of tie-dyeing now, and we've decided that there's some ways that are definitely better than others. And I'll start by saying where last year, where we recommended to use the vinegar solution, we found that that really didn't help that much. And I'll say that because the it was hard to wring the shirts out. So they were so wet when we tie-dyed that the dye was so saturated that it really just diluted it. So that's why we're making a new video. We came up with 4 new designs for this year, and for a little bit advanced. If you're a beginner at tie-dyeing, you should use one of the 4 designs from last year because we did very basic designs last year, and this year we expanded them just a little bit. So pick the best design for your experience level with tie-dyeing, and here's your prep information. So as you need to start, I'll start with the list of supplies, and I have my clipboard here because we all know I forget stuff, and I want to not forget anything this time. For those of you that got a camp kit, this is the one you're looking for. Now, yours would have your shirt still in it. I already took my shirt out, and here's our shirt. Now, if I was going to tie-dye this shirt, I would actually need to re-wash this shirt. Whether it's new or you're wearing it, it needs to be washed again before tie-dyed. You need to get the sizing out of the shirt, and since I'm wearing this, I need to get the oils from my skin out of the shirt before. Wash it. Do not use fabric softener. No fabric softener. And make sure that you can either use your shirt when it's spun out of the washer very well, where it's just kind of, you can feel it's wet, it's damp, but it shouldn't be dripping wet. And that was our problem with the vinegar solution last year, is we just couldn't get enough out of it. I know we could have put it back in our washing machine, but it would have made such a mess. And I mean, that's even more than a mess than I wanted to handle. So, you know, it's probably too much. So damp. You can also do them dry. The problem with doing, or the catch with doing a dry shirt, is that it takes a lot more dye, and the dye doesn't spread very well. So if you want a really bold design where the colors don't blend at all, you have very solid lines, and that's probably what you want to do. If you want your colors to blend a little bit and make for a smoother overall look, then you'll want to go with the damp shirt. So starting with the damp shirt, for us, we will need our tie-dye, our kit. Oops. This kit, each one includes 2 sets of gloves and then rubber bands. And you want to make sure that you use 1 set of gloves when you're tie-dyeing, and then another set of gloves when you wash them out. I had to learn the hard way that you need to wear gloves when washing out your shirts, because otherwise you just dye your hands. And earlier, I did it again this year when we did our shirts. You will see us tie-dyeing not these shirts, but other shirts, because we got so excited about our tie-dye, we just simply couldn't wait for our shirts to come. So when we were washing those shirts out, I forgot that I ought to wear my gloves when I washed out the shirts. And I ended up with, this hand was purple and blue, and this hand was green. All around my hand was green, and you can actually, you can't really see so much anymore, but you can still see just a tiny, you might be able to see that on camera, I'm not sure, the tiniest bit of where my hands were all green and dyed. And so wear gloves when you tie-dye, wear gloves when you wash out, and again, the 2 pairs work great. You can use the rubber bands in the kit. You may also decide to use string to tie up some of the designs. If you're going to use string, keep in mind that that absorbs dye too. So whatever your tie-dye touches wet, even that string will stain. So you want to make sure and lay something down, put that straight in the trash, get rid of that immediately. So we have our kits. Now your camp kit came with 3 of these little kits. That way you can have a couple of different colors. You can use other tie-dye that you have on hand. Do keep in mind that according to most manufacturer's instruction, this dye has to be used pretty quick. So 45 minutes on this one, I've heard as little as 30 minutes for dye to last, and then it starts to lose its potency. So we want to make sure, and once you mix your dye, then you'll need to use it fast. So you'll want to go ahead and tie your shirt up and then mix your dye. So that way you have the maximum amount of time, so you don't need to work super, super fast. But you do need to, to remember that you have to finish in 45 minutes. Any extra dye needs to be thrown out. Extra dye will stain whatever it touches. Once you get the dye in your shirt, it'll stain whatever it touches. And I know one time we had a bunch of tie-dye laying out on a plastic bag on our kitchen counter, but the shirts were touching. And the one shirt, the dye from the one transferred onto the other. And it looked pretty cool, but it wasn't exactly what we had been expecting. So the last supply that you're going to need that I included in the kit is actually this bag. Now we use a zip top bag because it seals the mess in. You can use like a grocery bag, but sometimes those bags have holes in them and you have to watch how you tie it up that it doesn't leak. So we use a gallon-sized zip top bag so that way we contain as much mess as possible and we don't end up leaking the dye out. One more thing that you're going to need is newspaper, and I don't have an extra piece right now with me. I probably should, but I don't. So newspaper, you wrap after you get done dyeing, you can wrap it up in the newspaper, and that'll help absorb some extra dye to make sure that the colors don't run. Sometimes the dye runs and you end up with kind of a muddy effect. You don't have to use newspaper. We find that, you know, it works both ways, without it. Yeah. So those are the supplies. I'm going to look at my clipboard because, as we said, we'll always forget something. So we talked about folding our shirts. You pick whichever design, the tie that you work best with. Our supplies. Oh, don't forget to cover your work surfaces. All your work surfaces need to be covered. In fact, we tie-dye outside. It's something we absolutely do not do ever inside because it is so messy. So we take it outside, we lay plastic down. You'll see us on our deck, we've laid plastic down, and we make sure and keep it on the plastic. Any dye that gets spilled needs to be cleaned up immediately. Now we are outside. We did get some on the rug we have outside. We poured a lot of water there on that spot, and we were able to get it out. But you have to act very fast and make sure that whatever you're pouring water on, it's okay to pour water on, which is why it's probably better to do it in the grass. But we just covered everything in plastic. So, gloves, rubber bands, string. Oh, something else that's kind of fun about tie-dye is that you never really know what you're going to get. And that means that you may dye or put the dye and tie your shirt up and put the dye on your shirt, and you open it up and find nothing that you expect. I know we did a shirt the other day, and I was expecting it to turn out one way, and it nothing. And that's okay. And then we wash all of our tie-dyes in one load separate from any other clothes. Some people say, oh, you can wash it with the load of jeans, or I don't. I put all the tie-dyes, and sometimes, one time I put a tie-dye in, and I put something else that was kind of newer tie-dye with it, and I ended up with a completely different shirt coming out of the washer, and it was actually fun. The one shirt that I had was kind of starting to fade a little bit, and I put it in with this really pretty blue, and my shirt came out blue with the design that still, you know, the purple and the pink were still showing, but the white part was now blue. I liked it. I thought it was fun that it had changed. So keep in mind that with tie-dye, you don't always know what you're going to get, and it's always an adventure even when it gets washed. We talked about the fact that it stains everything it touches. So make sure that if you use your kitchen sink, stainless steel sinks work better for washing out, by the way. A bathroom sink, it can stain your sink. So stainless steel sink, if you have like a farmhouse sink, then it can stain that too. So a stainless steel sink, you can use a utility sink. You can actually even wash these outside, and you'll need to be careful where the dye runs. and depending on what kind of dye or additives you might have used with your dye. So just be careful, whatever it touches stains. Counters, sinks, it'll stain. Very careful. It's a good idea when you're tie-dyeing to wear other tie-dye shirts. I know I've got one shirt that has a big old green spot on it now from where I had tie-dyed and I got slopped green tie-dye all over my shirt. And I think that's fun that now that has a spot of green on it, so I can remember the time that I tie-dyed the other one. Once you leave it out, once you're done tie-dyeing and you put it in your bag, I have heard that you can put it out in the sun and use the sun to help bake the colors into it. The heating helps to set the stains. We haven't really had a chance to try that. I had just heard that tip recently. So I'm going to probably try that the next time, maybe when I get around to doing my shirt, and see if it makes a difference or not. Either way, it's a good way to keep the mess outside if we leave them outside in the sun. So just make sure that your shirt stays wet while you're waiting. Speaking of waiting, follow your manufacturer's instructions on how long to wait. This one here in your camp kit says to wait 6 to 8 hours. And it says, it does say 6 to 8 hours. I was going to say, some say at least 6 to 8 hours. Some say longer. Follow your manufacturer's instructions. Now, when we mixed up our dye, we just used water. I've read lots of other ingredients that you can add to your tie-dye to try and intensify your tie-dye. We found that just using water works well for us. I know some chemicals are kind of toxic that others recommend. We do not use any of those chemicals because we are making a mess. I have animals, pets. I also have a collection of feral cats that live nearby, and I would worry that some of the dye we spill could end up harming one of them. And since they're not really pets, they kind of do as they choose. We want to make sure that we're not harming anything, so we do not recommend using anything that's toxic. Besides the fact, some people will mix it straight in their dye, and some, as we said, will soak the shirt in that. Again, we get back to it's hard to wring out what we need to wring out. So we recommend just using water in your dye bottle and nothing else. Now, once you mix up your dye, you're going to need to shake your bottle. Be mindful that sometimes the lids and the caps don't stay on as well as you might should. So we were shaking tie-dye the other day, and one of the lids wasn't on all the way, and it went everywhere. Fortunately, we were outside, and it just stained our shirts ahead of time, so it really wasn't that big a deal. But we need to make sure to be mindful that when we shake it, make sure nothing is leaking out. As always, get your caregiver's permission before you choose a shirt. Even your day camp shirt, you may have your caregiver may have different ideas about how to decorate your camp shirt as well. You need caregiver permission. You need to make sure that you're doing it where your caregiver thinks. And since this can make such a mess and stain things, you need your caregiver to kind of watch what you're doing to make sure that it's okay what happens. Again, caregiver permission before, caregiver with shoes, clothes, everything, and do watch your shoes. I know that Belle actually got dye on one of her shoes. Now, fortunately, she was wearing old shoes, so it wasn't a big deal, but the big purple mark on her shoe is now kind of funny to look at. So, let me check my clipboard. I think I've got it all. That, again, have fun. Be careful because this is messy. Caregiver permission. It stains everything. And don't forget to send us a picture of your final shirt. See you later. Bye.